Bob K.C. Forman, Dr. Forman, who's written the book Enlightenment Ain't What It Cracked Up to Be, along with several other books. He started meditating over 40 years ago and has been doing it on a consistent basis. He is a teacher, a lecturer, an author. He has been given seminars, workshops, talking about his own personal journey of enlightenment. He's the winner of numerous awards. This book has just been awarded the USA Best Book Award in Spirituality. It's one of 4 finalists. So let's give him a round of applause for that. And to talk about that journey, what he's been on, and how it applies to us in this book specifically, please put your hands together for Dr. Robert Forman.
Hi. Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me okay? Can you crank me up? Crank me up, baby. Now can you hear me in the back if I talk like this? Not too echoey? Sounds a little echoey to me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my second time here. And I find this crowd, you guys, a very interesting place to talk. Mostly because you're serious about your own spiritual lives. You're serious about growth. You're serious about practice in some sort. How many people have had or have a practice like a meditation practice of some sort? All of you. That is. Almost all of you. So I want to talk about that, but I want to talk a little about what I think is the hardest part. The hardest, getting started. No, I think the hardest part of the spiritual life, and I can certainly say this has been the case for me, the hardest part is that you have these experiences. At the tables this morning we were talking about these sort of moments of divine insight. We have these moments. We develop a sense of silence. We develop a sense of sort of openness in some sense. But then when we get home, we yell at our husbands or our wives, and I can't tell you how many spiritual people I know that have gotten divorced. We struggle in our regular lives. All right, come on, let's tell the truth here. How many people have gotten divorced at least once here? Twice, okay. You get 2 hands for twice. Any people beyond their own number of arms? So the question that we face is a very real question, which is, how do you live your spiritual life? It's as it were, easy to have the moments. It's, as it were, easy to have the moments of insight. But how do you bring it into your everyday life? Or another way to put it, can I read you a little from my book? Is that okay? That won't feel too boring? This book, by the way, is draft 11 of this book. And it's better than I can talk. I mean, at this point, it's like, you sort of work. It's like having a writer behind you, but this is the writer. The writer happened to be me, in any case. I want to tell you a little about who I am. I was writing this. The book takes place I was in a hermitage in upstate New York, and it was quite snowy. And so a lot of the imagery of the book is from being around snow. But so I start out the book saying, here I sit, a vast, empty me beneath a fearful, anxious me, much as I have done for 40 years. This listening, holding, witnessing, vast me is here. It is perhaps who or what I am. And yet this other me, this worried, scared, laughing me is also here, astonishingly, miraculously unhealed. I am closed and I'm afraid. And I'm as vast as the colorless air. I don't know if I'm a human being held in the arms of an endlessness or a vastness having human fears. Being both these things at once is the peculiar miracle of my life and of many lives of people on the path. learning to live them both at the same time and well is the challenge. That little passage, I think, captures for me the sort of challenge that we all face in the spiritual life. That is, you've been on this path now for years, and you know what it is to be like that. And yet, we all live with our anxieties and our fears and our smallnesses and our egos. So the challenge is, how do you somehow bring those two together? How do you live them both at once? How do you live them together? And I think that's for me is the real challenge. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't know about you, but when I started, I thought this would all take care of itself. I thought that when you gain enlightenment or you practice meditation for a long time and you do this stuff, I see you're nodding, so I'm glad to know somebody else. I sometimes think, God, how stupid could I have been to think this way? But I don't think we made this up. I think that we all thought when we started these paths that, oh, enlightenment, oh, woo, you know. You know, we all sort of have that thought, don't we? It's like, yeah, I'll get enlightened and I'll be just like those gurus and I'll be so charismatic and they're all so calm and you just think, oh, wow. And it's not that at all, you know? And we didn't make that up. I heard this from Maharishi. I could quote dozens of gurus. My guru was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. But here's what he said about enlightenment. So we didn't make this stuff up. Enlightenment will put an end to all suffering. Enlightenment will fill the heart with happiness, and it will bring perfect tranquility to the mind. A soul evolved to the cosmic state will be eternally contented. When the individual soul discovers the Atman, that is to say, that sense of vastness, full of dignity and power, it will be freed from all suffering. We didn't make this stuff up. You know, in a very real way, and I'm not speaking ill of Maharishi. I love Maharishi. He was a wonderful man, and I think he just brought an enormous amount of good to the world. But I think to some extent he sort of pulled the silk over my eyes. Not the wool, the silk. I think there was a kind of idealization of enlightenment that we all got. And I don't think he dissuaded us from it. I think that's probably a nice way to put it. And I think that a lot of gurus talk that way. That it's like there is a possibility here. I mean, who's going to follow somebody that says, do that and things will get sort of better? You know, it's like, it's not much of a sell, you know. So in many ways, I think we responded, and I think that he recognized what we were responding to. So we had these fantasies of what enlightenment would be, and then two things happened. And I mean this quite seriously. This was the path that happened to me anyway. Two things happened. The first was, and I don't know how to say this in a nice way, the first was we saw what the gurus were actually doing. You know, you think about enlightenment, it's going to be so wonderful, and then you start hearing these gurus, you know, like Trogyam Trungpa had girls dancing naked on a table. You know, and Muktananda was said to be sleeping with prepubescent girls. This is weird. What? You know, and some of the gurus seem to keep their noses pretty clean, but those guys, sexually pretty clean, but those guys seem to be really doing chicanery with the money. You know, money, power, and sex, I mean, there it is. It's the same problem. So we hold these guys up. We hold these gurus up, and we think they're so amazing, and then it turns out that they just have enormously clay feet. And you want to say to yourself, whatever the hell they have, it ain't what I want. That was really the problem. It was a huge problem for me. Because you hear about enlightenment, and you idealize enlightenment, you think it's going to be so amazing, and then you start to see what these guys are actually doing. And you want to go, what? What is this stuff then? And what, really? Is that as best we can do? So that was the first bit. The second thing that happened, and I don't know about you, but the second thing that happened was out of the millions and millions of people that took up meditation, we started to see some people that actually gained moksha, that actually gained what we were shooting for. Did you guys know anybody? You know anybody like that? You don't? Nobody in the room? Yeah, a couple of people. Okay, good, a couple of people. So you start seeing people with these experiences, and you start hearing about the stories that happen to people. And lo and behold, you look at these guys, and they're not terribly happy. Or women, they're not terribly happy. In fact, many of them are like the same poor schlubs as the rest of us. You know, and you want to go, what? What's that about? So here's the split that we're facing. We hear about enlightenment, and we know that enlightenment is a good thing, and we have some of that quality in our own lives, and yet our lives are not being radically transformed in a way that we sort of thought they would. You know, this sort of, and your life will be different, just didn't turn out to be true. However, there really is something called moksha. There really is something called enlightenment. By the way, the word enlightenment is an extremely vague term. Nobody really knows what it means. So I want to use the word moksha, which is the Hindu word for it, which means realization. And let me give you a sense of what that is. So I want to talk a little about what that actually is, and then I want to talk about how we can integrate that value into the rest of our lives, okay? So I got two more pieces I want to talk about. How am I doing on time? Right. That was easy so far. I will slowly use it up, and then I won't be doing so great. Okay, first, what is enlightenment like? Or what are we actually talking about when we talk about that? And here's a passage, I think my favorite passage describing this, and it's in the book, but my favorite passage describing this is from the Upanishads. Upanishads written about 6th century BC, 7th century BC, from something called the Mundaka Upanishad, and it goes like this. You might know this passage. Two birds, inseparable companions, perch on the same tree. One eats the fruit. The other looks on. The first bird is our individual self, feeding on the pleasures and pains of this world. The other is the universal self, silently witnessing all. Okay, now to translate that into English, two birds. One of them is eating. He flies around. He does his thing. He eats. He eats, sleeps, poops, whatever he does. The other bird is silently witnessing. He's just, that's all he does. He's just silent. It just says silently witnessing all. The universal self silently witnessing all. So what happens in enlightenment, according to this passage, is you have your activity. Things go along. You know, things happen. All this happens. And then there's this second half of you, as it were, at the same time. So it's this sort of quiet half. At the same time, you got this active half. Now, I bet some people in this room have had an experience kind of like that. Yes? Raise your hand. Oh, my God, you're kidding, half of you. Well, fabulous. Okay. That was not a bad oh, my God. That was like, oh, cool, you know. What we're describing here is actually surprisingly common. And I think what it is that you used to be all caught up in the world. You used to be all sort of involved. But then something becomes aware of itself, as it were, at the same time that you're doing activity. The first time this happens probably happens when you're sort of quietly, like on a walk or meditating or something. But after a while, it starts to be with you. You know, you're sort of walking around. You're kind of walking around, you know, and you're doing your thing, and you have that, you know, you're doing whatever you do. You're having this thing that's watching or witnessing. So in effect, what you're aware of is you are conscious of your own awareness at the same time that awareness is conscious of what's happening here. So that you have activity in the world, and you have silence, as it were, behind it, or beholding it, or nurture, or holding it, like cradling it in some sense. So there's a sense here of just holding activity. All right, that's one passage describing. You all get that? I'm seeing a lot of nodding, so I'm going to go on. So the second passage I want to give you is from a Buddhist text called the Dhammapada. And it goes like this. As rain breaks through an ill-thatched house, lust breaks through an ill-trained mind. As rain does not break through a well-thatched house, lust will not break through a well-trained mind. Okay, here's the image. You know, have you all seen a thatched roof? I mean, a real one? It's just straw. It's just straw piled on top. Anyway, so the image here is of a thatched roof, right? And rain, lust here, desire, wishes, wants, attachments, all that stuff, just come right through the roof and just, hit you on the head, as it were, just kind of get to you. That's the baddie, right? The goodie here is rain comes down, lust continues to be there, desires continue to be there, feelings continue to be there, so that all that stuff doesn't go away. But at the same time, it doesn't get through the roof. It doesn't quite get to you. So there's a sense here of being in the middle of your own desires, being with or having your own feelings and wishes and needs. At the same time, though, you also, at some level, are not subject to them. They're not quite catching you. Now, that could sound like you're being like psychotic and dissociating from everything. Don't think that. This is not like dissociation. Rather, it's that a sort of dignity in the middle of your own feelings, a kind of stability in the middle of your own activity. That's what's being described. So it's close to that passage I read you from the book, being a vastness at the same time that you're being a nervous Nelly. Being open at the same time that you're anxious. And that's what's being described. Yeah? So don't think enlightenment. The word enlightenment, sometimes people think, oh, it's going to mean I don't have any ego, I don't have any needs, I don't have any wishes. It's being in the middle of your own feelings, having your own feelings, but being stable in the middle of them. Being open even though you have feelings. And the feelings might be good, they might be bad, they might be neutral. Yeah, you all with me? You get this? You get what I'm describing? You sort of have a sense for this? Okay. But so that's what I think the word enlightenment or moksha is actually pointing to. However, you can have an experience like that and still be a mess. I'm going to describe, I came away from a meditation course and I had much of that experience along with me, and so I wrote the following. Despite all these changes, big and small, and with all the perspective of an impatient 25-year-old, which is how old I was when I was on that course, all I felt was disappointment. My mind had not become totally silent. The world had not been transformed, and I was still spinning my little 3x5 card that said on one side, I'm anxious today, and on the other side it said, today I'm not anxious. Seriously, I had it hanging from the ceiling. I had this. I still got nervous before I went downstairs to dinner. I was still afraid I'd ever make a decent meditation teacher, and I was still often lonely. The sleep changes and the changes that had happened inside were interesting and all, but compared to the end of all suffering for which I was waiting, this was pretty much squat. Yeah. It's a highly technical term. So my life began at that moment, really. The challenge of my life began at that moment. I was 25 years old, and here I'd been having all these wonderful spiritual experiences, and I was still a nervous wreck. So then the question becomes, okay, what are we actually going to get from all this stuff, and what good is this stuff, and how do you bring these two together is really the challenge, I think. And that was the challenge for my life, and I think it's the challenge for all of our lives. That's kind of what I'm pointing to. And I think I may have discovered in the course of my life, and it took a long time, I may have discovered one key trick that I think may help us do this. And you can understand the trick or the key if you think about the following scenario. You've been hanging on to a secret your whole life. You have just never been able to tell anybody because you're so, fill in the blank, embarrassed, ashamed, whatever it is. And then finally you talk to some friend and you tell your secret to your friend. How do you feel after you've told that secret? Relieved. Good word, yeah. and have you all had that experience? You're all told, oh, fine, okay. Huh? You feel lighter. That's an interesting word. You feel lighter. You feel relieved. You feel easier. It's almost like there was a burden on your shoulders, and now it's like that. Or another way you can put that is you feel open, more effortless, as it were. It just isn't quite as hard to be you. You know what I'm describing? Yeah, you know the sort of quality I'm describing? Those qualities, and here's the trick, those qualities, the sense of openness that comes after you've told your secret or your truth, the sense of lightness that you feel having told what is really so, the sense of openness that you feel. It's as if there was a block here and you just went, and you get bigger. That sense of openness that you now feel is precisely the same quality that comes at the depths of meditation. It is precisely the same quality to which enlightenment is pointing. So that if you want to apply the openness that you find on that walk in the woods to your everyday life, the trick is to become dedicated to truth-telling. Telling the truth. I'll give you an example of that in 1 second. But I mean, we all know what that means, but I want to talk about telling the truth just a little. Telling the truth sounds like you have a kind of a clunk, or like you're hitting your head. It's like the truth goes clunk and now you got it. Don't think that. Telling the truth is more a verb than a noun. It's like to tell the truth is to keep at it, to keep going. So the truth is always like this. You tell your truth, and then you realize, oh, beneath that is another one. And then beneath that is yet another one. And what we're talking about is a lifetime, or at least a period of time, in which you are dedicated to telling the real truth and discovering what that real truth is. There's a quality in that. Truth-telling has a quality, and you know it when you feel it. You know when you do it. It always has a kind of a vibratory quality to it. Sometimes I experience that as anxiety. It's like, I don't know if I can tell this. Sometimes I experience it as excitement, like, oh, God, I really want to share this with somebody. Sometimes I experience it as just this sort of quality, like when I'm alone, and I go, oh, this is really cool. I don't know what it is, but I'm onto something here, you know. And it's a kind of marker. It's not a marker that you have told the truth. It's a marker that you're getting there. You're getting to it. As you get to it, it becomes totally easy to do it. Okay, now I want to tell you one story. I'll read you a story if you don't mind. And I'll read you this story because A, it's true, and B, it's a good story. As Gaddy? Yeah, he's a good guy. I like Gaddy. As Gaddy was telling you, we all like Gaddy. Is that true? Is that really true? Yeah, good. Oh, it's all about Gaddy, actually. Oh, by the way, another thing about telling the truth, here's another secret for telling the truth. It can't be about somebody else. In other words, for you to say, yes, we all like Gaddy, doesn't help anybody. You have to tell the truth about you. It might help Gaddy. If you say to your spouse, you were really mean to me, that's not helping anything. If you say to your spouse, I've been really mean to you, that's going to help somebody. That helps a lot. So truth-telling has to be about you. It is never in the form of, you look really fat in that dress, dear. It doesn't help anybody. But it may be in the form of, I'm a little worried that I'm looking fat. You get it? So the truth-telling has to be real stuff. It's not just like, I'm going to be pissed off and tell you something. Okay, here's the story. And as Gaddy, you want to correct my pronunciation again? Fine, thank you. As Gaddy told you, I've written a lot of books, and my first book was something called The Problem of Pure Consciousness, and it was written in response. It was written in response to a fellow named Stephen T. Katz. Mr. Katz was the dominant voice in the study of mysticism when I came into graduate school, And I read this guy, and I thought, oh, my God, he's so bad. He was so wrong. And he was a belligerent guy. He was very aggressive. And so when I took him on like I was terrified of this guy. He was one real mean. Mm-hmm. Thank you. He was one really mean dude, yeah. And so this happened. The book comes out in 1990. And I hear from my publisher, a woman named Cynthia Reed, that she told me early in that year, soon after the book comes out, she said, oh, I talked to Katz, man. She also published his book. She runs Oxford University Press. And she said, I talked to Katz. He's really going to come gunning for you at that conference in November. That was the phrase. He's really going to come gunning for you. It sounds like children, doesn't it? Yeah, but that's what she said. And there I was. It was probably March when I heard that. I just laughed. And then within 2 or 3 days, I was waking up in the middle of the night, like, and I would wake up, like that. And every night I woke up for a couple of months. This is probably about April now. I wake up in a cold, bloody sweat, and I say to myself, I got to do something. I got to do something here. So I pad out to the living room. I put on my robe, and I pad out to the living room. And I said, this is ridiculous. Shivering more from fear than cold, I pulled up a blanket and I said to myself, okay, Bob, what are you really afraid of here? Talk about truth-telling. That's what I was doing. Though I wouldn't have put it in those phrases. I drew a blank. Well, what's really likely to happen in New Orleans, I say to myself. And all those fears kind of kick in, and everything I've been saying to myself for months and months and months kick in. Oh, he's going to do my footnotes, and he's going to tell me my argument is terrible. It's 15 minutes, is that what I got? Not quite yet. Okay. No, he's going to tell me my arguments are terrible, and he's going to say this, he's going to say that, and wasn't helping at all. So I said, taking a deep breath, beneath all this, what are you really afraid he's going to say? I didn't know, but my breathing got a little tighter. So I figured there was something here. Okay, I said to myself, tell the truth. What are you really afraid of here? Another deep breath. Okay, if I tell myself the real truth, I'm afraid he'll say that I'm stupid. Now here I'm a graduate student, just got my PhD. The one thing the graduate student can't possibly allow himself to ever think is that he's stupid. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal for us. You know, it's like the smarts is the only thing you got. And I was afraid this guy was going to say, yeah, 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 yeah. Isn't that the way it is? It's always the stuff that we care about. It's always the stuff we care about like that. Yes, I said, I'm scared he'll say I'm stupid. Well, am I stupid? I wanted to leap to my own defense with, of course, you're not stupid, but I didn't. After all these years of trying to prove how smart I am, after all my blustering in seminars that I'm as quick as the next guy, after all the A's, here it was. Yeah, I could be a lot smarter. If I was really smart, it wouldn't have taken me nearly so long to see what he was saying and to write my books. I bet I could have done this a whole lot faster, and I know my arguments could be even better. I wish I was a whole lot smarter. So yeah, I am stupid. Now, I know you all want to leap to my defense and say, oh, no, you know, because none of us want to face this, you know. But yeah, I'm stupid, and I'm stupider than I wish I was. And it was obvious. My breathing loosened a notch, and my shoulders let go, and there was something here. Well, I went on, I bet he'll find some wrong page numbers on my footnotes. This was a big one for me, because my footnotes, are never in order. My ducks just will never be in that row, you know. Well, will he be right? Are my footnotes sloppy? Again, I didn't particularly want to think this. I tried to get all those notes right. I tried to make them perfect, but my ducks did seem to wander off. Yeah, I probably screwed up some of those notes. If he says I'm sloppy, I'll have to say, yeah, he's probably right. I don't have all my ducks in a row. Even just admitting these things to myself was downright embarrassing. But here it was, the plain old truth. Well, maybe he'll say I'm aggressive. Am I aggressive? This one was harder to face. I built my life about being a victim. I'll say that again. I built my life around being a victim. But maybe I was being aggressive. Look how I've handled poor cats. I've probably taken them on a dozen articles. Now I've written a whole book. I must seem like a damn bulldog to him. So maybe I am a little aggressive. I actually smiled at that because I used to think I was such a wimp. For the next half an hour, I told myself every scary truth about me I could think of, that I write poorly, that I'd use cats to advance my career, that I'd co-opted other people's ideas, that I treated him and his colleagues poorly, even that I was balding. Balding. I didn't like to see any of these, but the truth was every nasty thought was in some very real sense true. At some point, I had whispered to myself every dirty, nasty, embarrassing secret I could think of. And at just that moment, I looked up. Standing across the room was a huge, pot-bellied dragon. Honest to goodness, green, scaly, slimy, fire spewing from his nose, a dragon. I could even smell the sulfur. And his face was unmistakably, hysterically, Stephen Katz's. This is true, by the way, and I've never had a vision before or since. This was one of those moments that you go, I don't know where that came from, but it's one hell of a vision. I'm not given to apparitions, but this big old pot-bellied dragon was so perfect I laughed right out loud. Katz clearly was my dragon. He was dangerous as hell for me. Like St. George, I had to take him on. I'd made him angry, and I had to slay him. One thing that made me really chuckle was his pot belly. Katz had something of a belly. Funnily enough, I thought to myself, so do I. Katz is Jewish. Well, that's funny. So am I. He'd always seemed pretty aggressive to me. And here I just acknowledge how aggressive I was. He's a scholar. So am I. He edits books. So do I. We even both publish with Oxford University Press. And he probably wishes he was smarter. So do I. And there it was. In all the ways I didn't want to think about it, we were just alike. Two Jewish, pot-bellied, fire-breathing sons of bitches. Katz, my great sulfur-spewing dragon, this big old fellow with whom I've been fighting tooth and nail all these years, was me. He wasn't the one who was spewing venom. I was. And I'm the one with the pot belly. What I was really afraid of was all the truths about me I couldn't face. That I'm aggressive. That I'm an angry Jewish guy. That I'm a fire-spewing dragon. It wasn't Katz I'd been so afraid of all these years, it was me. I'm the bloody dragon. I got you. The very moment I said that sentence to myself, that big old slimy fire-breathing dragon went right into my belly, like some cartoon character spiraling down a drain. I'm the effing dragon, I laughed out loud. I'm the one I've been running from. Don't we all know this? The stuff that we really fear, the stuff we don't like, that's the stuff that gets us. And the trick is always to tell the truth about what is really true, about who you really are, about what is really the case for you. And I think that it's always, always, always the challenge. Whenever I'm in pain, my challenge is, can I tell the truth about what's causing me pain? When I'm afraid of somebody, when I am afraid of what I've said to my wife, always the challenge is, can I tell the real truth? It is such a simple challenge. But I think the telling of the truth is the very challenge to which silence invites us. Silence has the quality of without boundaries. And when I'm bounded by something I can't say to myself, I am bounded. To tell the truth opens that very boundary. The silence inside is open and without effort, but it takes effort to be stuck in my own assumption system. It is harder to be me when I am attached and unconscious of it than it is when I am honest and not afraid. Letting go of the truths that you do not wish to think is always the challenge and is the invitation to which our spiritual lives invite us. And now I've got 7 minutes left, and I want to talk to you guys. So quick, ask me some questions. And then and I have one little passage I want to read, so I'm going to cut you off about 2 minutes before my time is up. Warn me at about 2 minutes. Go.
I was trying to type for everybody else. I was. I am. I will be.
Are we going to get to this after a while?
We will. Jean Houston has been a great mentor for me, and I reached great heights working with her. And one time I said, Jean, I don't want to come back. When I'm up there, I don't want to come back to this world. I want to stay there. I feel so good there. And she said, Basha, even I have to go outside and pick up the dog poop. She says, you have to live in this life, too. That's the balance. That's exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I also wanted to do that spiritual bypass. I got something I can do. I'm very good at it. I call it my Buddha belly. I can go into this place and not give a shit, really, about anybody else. It's so comfortable and so easy to be open. And it's an escape. My meditation life has been an escape. And the sort of bringing us back into the regular dog poop of life. It's funny how you want to curse when you start talking about life. Yeah. Yes, was that a hand?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it was. I especially want to thank you about your comments regarding the truth-telling. And as I'm sitting here and recognizing my own aging process, I'm thinking that this business of enlightenment and growth and so forth, the human development, seems to be a combination of two things right now to me in my life. One would be this continual self-study about awakening, and staying awake, and that's involving the truth-telling. And the other aspect is there's a maturing that seems to be happening just on the basis of age and experience, and that the two together are doing what I need to be more fully human.
Yeah. And I think that, first of all, I think the spiritual path gets a bum rap. Really, every human being I've ever met is on a path. Whether we call it a spiritual path or not, whether we call it a path of self-reflection or not. So I think we're all sort of engaged in this. I think what the spiritual path offers, and it's not a small gift, is it offers us a kind of both increase in speed and depth to this process. If I was a businessman and I was sort of self-reflecting, most of my time would be spent doing my business. But if I'm on a spiritual path, the bulk of my time, I mean, obviously nobody does this full time, but more of my time is spent in that kind of self-reflective forward movement stuff. The idea that we can do a meditation practice, which sort of is a kind of opening up, kind of enables the process to move a little more quickly and a little more deeply. I think the spiritual path and what you're describing is a kind of self-reflective process. I think you are engaged in the process every human being must be engaged in. But I think that the self-reflection and the sort of self-consciousness that you're bringing to it simply speeds up what is a natural human process and possibly makes it go much faster. So yeah, I agree. I sometimes think that, sometimes I wonder if if I started out so bad, I'd just come up to normal. But I don't think I was that much crazier than everybody else. I was pretty crazy. There was a hand over here someplace? Yes, sir.
One of my great teachers on the path has been Alan Watts. And so I want your comment on what and in the book Psychotherapy East and West, which is very articulate, he says enlightenment is the process of disidentifying with your social role or with whatever you identify yourself as, and that's what happens with gurus and Hinduism, and that's what happens in psychotherapy. So he articulates all that. So, in a way, as I'm listening to you, when you tell the truth about something about yourself, you break up that identity. So
perfect. Excellent. What you're describing is that we're all engaged in a kind of storytelling about who we are, and we pick them up from childhood. We pick them up from our whole life experience, and we get a sort of persona. We get kind of defined as something. Truth-telling allows you to go, really? Am I that? Maybe not. My favorite story along these lines was I had a dear friend, and she had bright red hair, almost as bright as yours, and she called herself Susie Sunshine. And she'd always been Susie Sunshine in college. And one day she said to me, I don't know if I am Susie Sunshine. And it was such a revelation for her that she could step out of that. And it was a moment of truth-telling for her. I don't know how far she went. I lost contact with her. But she was stepping out of a role. I think that's kind of what we're describing. Yeah. One more question, then I want to read you something. Yeah.
I've always been fascinated with the connection between psychotherapy and spirituality.
Me too.
And when I hear you talk about telling your secret and letting go, it occurs to me that in traditional religious ritual or whatever, that saying that you give your sins, you let go of your sins and then you're saved. And I'm wondering if that process in traditional religion is like telling your secret.
I think so. No. I think so. Now, when you say traditional religion, you're really thinking Catholicism there, because not everybody does confessionals. But nevertheless, I think it's a very interesting instinct they have there. I think that the idea that it becomes formulaic is probably counterproductive. Say 3 Hail Marys and you'll be fine. I think that's probably counterproductive. But the idea that you would go into somebody and say, I haven't told anybody this, but I stole a pack of cigarettes last week, would be, I think, very healthy and very good for people. So I think that you're right. I completely agree with you. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't think it's just Catholicism. I think in the born-again experience in the Protestant church,
Oh, good. Yeah.
where you lay down your
Yeah,
sins and you
Good.
ask Jesus to
Yeah.
take care of them.
Yeah, right. All right, I want to read you one little passage, because this is my invitation to you. Rather than happiness, or ananda, the word that Hindus use for pleasantness, in the end, what you get is to become ever more real. You get to stand bent unto the burdens of fewer and fewer of your own lives. With your feet planted ever more deeply in the soil of what is so, you get to become ever more vertical. And you get to discover with and to invite others who wish to do the same. What the spiritual path offers is not unmingled happiness. And it is not the conventional. Nor is it camaraderie or ease, though these may come. What you get instead is to be increasingly open to the joy and the melancholy that is the deeply lived life. In the end, you get to be increasingly alive, the mystery coursing up your spine. You get to be more awake, more honest, freer, and to stand up straighter and straighter in what you are. You get to be, in all its ancient simplicity, Homo erectus. And my invitation to you is, don't stop. Don't stop. Oh, I have a second invitation. Oh, my goodness, thank you. I have a second invitation to you. Books are for sale outside. Buy my book.